I would like to make a bold statement to you. I would like to say that Bitcoin is the most powerful model for developing technology that we've ever seen in human history. And I really mean that, not as hyperbole, but as practical fact. And so I like to talk about this idea of Bitcoin as this first example of a decentralized application. And when I say decentralized application, I mean four core aspects that I believe have made Bitcoin so successful as a technology and as a model that we ought to emulate for building other types of technology. And so let me go through real quickly these four aspects that Bitcoin has really pioneered when it comes to building decentralized systems. The first aspect, of course, is it's an open source system. It's not a closed proprietary standard that a company has proposed, but rather it can access the smartest and most brilliant people in the world that are interested in this type of technology to add to the way the cryptographic ledger works, the way the Bitcoin system functions, and that's proven extremely powerful in the last 5 years. As Bitcoin has evolved, it's attracted cryptographic experts from all around the world to improve the system and build upon it. And so having open source as its foundation really changed the system from something that could have been a small cloistered experiment within a company to a global standard. So the second aspect is it wasn't just an open source project. It had this innovative idea of attaching a digital token to the use of that application. So by that I mean simply that to use the Bitcoin network, you have to have Bitcoins. And that simple, elegant way of monetizing Bitcoin, that simple association between Bitcoins and the use of the Bitcoin network was all the incentive structure that was needed in order to imbue that network with incentives that made people go and want to grow that ecosystem, to add to the development, to find merchants. In one way, you could say that the entire monetary structure of Bitcoin is captured in 4 lines of code. And that's incredibly powerful. We've come up with these complex systems for describing incentives, and we have these corporate structures and different incentive structures. And here's just a beautifully elegant system for capturing all of those motives and translating them in just to a few lines of code. And so having that open source, again, tokenized and attached to that digital token really gave value to the Bitcoin network. It created a scarce resource that people had to buy in order to access this network. The third aspect that's really powerful with Bitcoin is the fact that there is no central point of failure. Bitcoin adopted this ethos of a peer-to-peer network and allowed for the storage of all the data that was relevant to the operation of the Bitcoin network. You could download all of the transactions in the history of Bitcoin onto a Bitcoin node, and all of those peers in the peer-to-peer network have a copy of all those transactions. That's really powerful. There became no way for the Bitcoin network to fail. There wasn't an issue if power went out in one country and all of a sudden the network would go down. It was geographically distributed across thousands and eventually millions of copies around the world. So that idea that we want to build anti-fragile systems, we want to build systems that will work on a 24/7 basis with 0 interruptions, and they're not subject to geographical or jurisdictional risk, is an incredibly powerful one and separates Bitcoin from all of the predecessors that attempted to solve this problem of how to transfer value, but using centralized mechanisms. So again, open source, had its own token to monetize, decentralized all the storage of its data, and finally, it has a cryptographic mechanism. It has a consensus mechanism that proves a node has actually added value to the network. In the case of Bitcoin, we call this proof of work. It's an implementation of what's known as hash cache, which is showing that a computer has actually added value to the Bitcoin network. Now, this was a stroke of genius in that what Bitcoin needed was a high level of security. And in order to achieve that high level of security, it needed a lot of computational power for computers to add that to the network. And by proving that a node had added value, you now had a mechanism where you could reward those nodes for providing those values with additional Bitcoin tokens. As we all know, for those familiar with the technical aspects, there are right now 25 Bitcoins created every block, and that's a competition where all of these computers are providing that hashing power.